Holidays can be dangerous to your health. Can home remedies help you survive minor household mishaps? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Preparing festive meals can lead to cuts, burns, sore feet, and leg cramps. Are there remedies in your kitchen cabinet that can help?
The ancient Egyptians had a way of healing battle wounds that still works thousands of years later. How can we harness the power of sugar to heal cuts, burns, and hard-to-treat wounds?
We get an update from pediatrician Alan Green on colds and flu in kids and revisit yoga for back pain.
These stories and your calls are all coming up on the People's Pharmacy.
First, this news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, adults who take drugs for attention deficit disorder do not appear to be at increased risk for cardiovascular complications. Medications such as Ritalin or Adderall are stimulants. They can raise blood pressure and increase heart rate. So experts have been concerned that such medications might increase the risk of a heart attack or stroke. The official prescribing information from the FDA warns that sudden death, stroke, and myocardial infarction have been reported in adults taking stimulant drugs at usual doses for ADHD.
A new study has laid those fears to rest. The researchers analyzed the medical records of more than 440,000 adults who received medical care from large HMOs or Medicaid. The subjects were aged 25 through 64, and approximately 150,000 of them took prescription pills for ADHD. Statistical evaluation revealed no differences in heart attacks, strokes, or deaths between those taking ADHD medicines and those who never took them. With more than 800,000 person-years covered in the study, the scientists are reasonably confident that such drugs do not pose unusual heart risks.
The National Transportation Safety Board has issued a call for less distraction behind the wheel. The NTSB has concluded that using cell phones while driving can divert a driver's attention with lethal consequences. A spectacular crash last year in Missouri occasioned the call for states to ban both conversations and texting. A driver was busy sending and receiving 11 text messages in the minutes prior to running into the back of a semi-truck. This accident started a major pileup in which the pickup truck driver, 19 years old, was killed along with another teen riding in a school bus, and 38 people were injured. Other accidents have also been attributed to momentary distraction caused by electronic devices. The NTSB would like to see states ban texting, emailing, or even talking while driving, unless it's an emergency. Even hands-free devices are considered dangerous while driving. Although such a recommendation carries no legal authority, it may encourage states to stiffen their laws and enforcement.
People with type 2 diabetes are often urged to get their blood sugar as close to normal as possible, but several studies have not shown that such tight control has advantages. Now, an analysis of 14 clinical trials, including more than 28,000 participants, confirms that intensive blood sugar control does not save lives. Complications involving the kidney or the retina were less common under intensive blood sugar treatment, but the difference was not significant. Patients in the intensive blood glucose treatment groups were, however, at significantly higher risk of having their blood sugar drop to dangerously low levels. The fact that there was no obvious benefit to outweigh this potential harm might spur doctors and patients to think twice about this approach to diabetes treatment.
Metabolic syndrome is generally thought of as a precursor to diabetes and heart disease. It's characterized by a large waist, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. Insulin resistance and high triglyceride levels are also features of metabolic syndrome. People with this condition often have a sleep disorder called obstructive sleep apnea. Such individuals may snore loudly and have periods in which they stop breathing temporarily and gasp for breath.
Researchers in India have demonstrated that treating obstructive sleep apnea with a device called Continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP, can help alleviate some of the symptoms of metabolic syndrome. The investigators recruited 86 patients with both sleep apnea and metabolic syndrome for a double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover trial. Half the patients were treated with CPAP first, while the remaining people got a sham CPAP mask with minute holes in it and a flow-restricting connector. The treatments were used for 3 months, followed by a month of no treatment. Then patients were switched to the opposite treatment for 3 months. During the CPAP treatment, blood pressure, blood sugar, and blood lipids improved, while they did not improve during sham treatment. In some patients, CPAP treatment was associated with a reversal of metabolic syndrome. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon. I'm a pharmacologist.
And I'm Terry Graydon. I'm a medical anthropologist. Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're considering the stories behind the health headlines, and we'll be talking about home remedies that may come in handy over the holiday season. But first, we want to introduce you to a doctor who's done his own investigation into an ancient home remedy for curing wounds. Dr. Richard Knudsen, now retired, has been an orthopedic surgeon in Greenville, Mississippi.
Dr. Richard Knudsen, we have been following your work for over 25 years. We've been writing about your sugar treatment for wound care and burns, and we'd like to know a little bit more about you. When did you start practicing medicine? What kind of specialist are you, and when did you find out about sugar?
I started practicing medicine when I got my degree in 1970, although I'd been working earlier than that on wounds in medical school. I learned about sugar. It's one of those once-over-lightly things you touch on in medical school. You have history of various medicines and so forth, and one of them concerned the Egyptian use of honey and grease on wound healing, although there were no details on it in medical school. I don't know if anybody really did much research recently on that subject. I got interested in it some years later after I became an orthopedic surgeon. I moved down to Greenville, Mississippi from New York City after finishing my residency, and I suppose I might have been curious if I'd run into this as a general surgeon, but I ran into it as an orthopedic surgeon. I had patients who had bad pressure sores on their bottoms, and they were resistant to all known antibiotics at that time. I was particularly interested because the bone was infected, and it was badly infected. It would respond to nothing. And when I heard from an older nurse that in the old days they used sugar on the wound, I laughed at them. I thought that was absolutely absurd. But I tried the sugar, and all of a sudden I found that it was very, very effective in helping to heal the wounds. But what was impressive to me was that the wounds involving bone healed, and I knew nothing that would heal them in those circumstances at all. I mean, there was nothing that I had ever heard of that would heal them. And since we'd run out of antibiotics, I continued to use the sugar and eventually added other things to the sugar to help make the process a little bit easier on the nurses and on me, and me, I should say. After that first time, I kept using the material and kept broadening the number of things we use it on. Initially, we were afraid to use it, for example, on patients who were diabetic, and we found that it worked very well in those patients. We were very afraid to use it on burns because we didn't know anything about it. We used it on burns, and they healed without scars and very, very quickly. I mean, we used it on everything we encountered, and we found it worked very, very well.
And then you wrote it up. In 1981, in the Southern Medical Journal, it was published.
Yes, it was.
What kind of response did you get from your colleagues?
Most of them didn't believe it. A lot of them tried it and found it was working very, very well, as did my hospital colleagues. The usual response was, it can't work, but they would get into a bind and they'd run out of antibiotics, or they'd find a wound was not healing, and they would try it. It did much better than they expected, I'm sure.
Dr. Knudsen, how many years have you been using sugar, and how many patients have you treated?
The number of years is approaching 40. It's actually 36 within a month or so. And the number of patients, I should say, are right at 7,000 counted, but many, many more than that have been treated. In other words, I don't really count the ones where we suggested something and they tried it and it worked, and I don't count that as part of my large number of treated patients. I can tell you this, though. This is the most surprising thing to me. After nearly 40 years of using the material, I have never ceased to be excited about healing a wound. You get a special tingle when you know that your technique is going to work without antibiotics and no skin grafts, no other treatment, and it works every time.
So we're talking about pretty bad wounds in most cases that actually you are managing to heal without using antibiotics, so you're not increasing the problem of antibiotic resistance.
Oh, that's true. As a matter of fact, I'll do it the other way. In 4,000 years, there has been no demonstrated antibiotic resistance to this combination of materials. The sugar and the grease of Egyptians works perfectly well until this time. There are no resistant bacteria, as far as we know, and I have not run into any bacteria that developed resistance, which is a fairly common thing to see after use of even very simple or even complicated antibiotics.
Dr. Richard Knudsen, can you tell us how you use the sugar in healing wounds and burns? What kind of sugar are you using? And you just mentioned the word grease. What do you mean by that?
Well, initially, this is quite important to understand. We never stopped looking for improvement. That was either improvement in terms of expense or improvement in terms of the material. We started using povidone iodine or betadine materials early on because they seemed to be very helpful in combination with the sugar. Over the course of the next 35 years, we have gradually improved our understanding of what happened years and years ago with the Egyptians, and we find that the sugar is important, but much like the Egyptians, we learned that over time the sugar was helpful, and so was the grease that they used. What we started doing about 5 years ago was using cooking oil, either corn oil or standard cooking oil or canola oil. If you're very exotic, you can use we use some olive oil, a little bit expensive, but we use it, and we found that all of those oils are very important, as they were to the Egyptians. Oil, as you know, is very helpful. It's used in triple antibiotic ointment and Vaseline and so forth. And we have a number of materials that are used commonly. We don't even think of them as being wound healers, but hemorrhoidal ointment, for example, is used, and we look upon it as being very helpful. The same kind of material is used as an oil. We commonly use confectioner's sugar, about 3 to 4 parts confectioner's sugar and 1 part cooking oil, and these work beautifully to heal a wound. That is almost the perfect combination at this point that we've worked on for more than 30 years. Now, there's one small caution. It doesn't sound like much, but if you have significant bleeding, you wait a day or so before you add the sugar.
Now, you've mentioned burns, and when people are burned badly enough, they usually end up in the emergency department and ultimately in a burn center. Tell us a little bit about your use of confectionery sugar and cooking oil to treat burns.
We found that quite by accident, actually. I had burns next to orthopedic injuries, and we began treating the orthopedic injury and overlapped onto the burn material. Initially, this happened in a burn center, which was here in Greenville, the only one in the state. We found that the burns treated with the sugar and at that time, povidone iodine healed faster than the ones that were treated with other materials. And we didn't have infections. It seemed very common that the wounds treated with other than sugar almost always had infections. And it wasn't through sloppy care on the part of the people taking care of the burns. It was just the way it worked. We just didn't have infections. We treated more than 1,000 continuously without antibiotics, and we never had an infection. Parenthetically, we didn't have to do skin grafts because they healed without scars and without skin grafts, and basically healed completely just with gentle care using the sugar and the povidone iodine.
Do you now use confectionery sugar and cooking oil for those burn treatments?
That's correct, yes.
What other sorts of wounds have you used this treatment on?
You asked about the number of the different kinds of wounds. We've had everything from lacerations, shotgun blasts, gunshot wounds, various kinds of weird wounds like, for instance, a brown recluse spider bite. We've had a number of those, and they've healed very quickly. That includes snake bites, abscesses, amputations, various kinds of abrasions, ulcers of various kinds, and just a full variety of different kinds of wounds.
Dr. Knudsen, what would you like to share with your medical colleagues? What would you like them to know, and what would you like our listeners to know about the sugar cooking oil treatment for wounds and burns?
Well, the most important thing is it works.
Dr. Richard Knudsen, thank you very much for sharing this with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
And my pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Dr. Richard Knudsen relating his extensive case study of sugar to heal wounds. There's a link to his publication from our website, and you'll also find an extended interview with Dr. Knudsen. He provides more details about his sugar cure for treating burns, bed sores, gunshots, and other wounds.
Our lines are open for your calls and questions. If you've had success with an unusual home remedy, we'd love to hear about it. We'll be very interested in talking about holiday hazards like kitchen cuts or burns, indigestion, maybe sore feet or leg cramps from standing up or shopping. You can give us a call at 888-472-3366. You can send us email. It's Joe or Terry at peoplespharmacy.com. And you can also reach us by way of Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about how to tell colds from the flu in kids. And we'll take your calls and consider how home remedies might help you get through this holiday season. Again, that number, 888-472-3366. Don't forget, you can email us, Joe or Terry, Terry, at peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Redix Industries, makers of Utter Cream, an utterly smooth extra care cream enriched with urea to moisturize dry, cracked skin. The number's 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
And by Card Drug, nationally recognized for expanding the role of pharmacy beyond the counter through its community health centers and medication therapy management programs. Locations in communities across North Carolina, online at kerrdrug.com.
If you would like a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 839, or you can find it on the website, peoplespharmacy.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're taking the mystery out of medicine. We're also talking about home remedies that might come in handy this time of year. You can share your story at 888-472-3366, or you can send us a message by way of Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy. If you'd like to email us, It's Joe at People's Pharmacy or Terry, Terry, at People's Pharmacy.
This is the season for colds and flu, and you're going to be in close quarters with family and friends, and there's almost always going to be a child there sniffling and sneezing. Kids seem to be more susceptible to these infections than anyone else. We talked with the People's Pharmacy pediatrician, Dr. Alan Green, to find out how parents can tell the difference between those kinds of infections. He's the founder of drgreen.com and author of Feeding Baby Green and Raising Baby Green.
Kids get a lot of colds, especially when they're little kids off to daycare. It seems that just one child in a daycare setting comes down with a cold, and all of a sudden they've all got it. They're all taking it home. How can parents tell the difference between a cold and the flu?
The words cold and flu are really linked together, like New Year's and New Year's resolutions almost. It's cold and flu season, but they're extremely different illnesses. It's confusing sometimes with most illnesses because most of the symptoms we experience are a few different ways our body has of fighting off an infection. We sneeze to try to eject viruses from the nose. We cough often to try to get rid of germs out of our lungs or throat. We vomit to get rid of stuff out of our stomach. We have diarrhea to blow it out from the intestines. Fever is there to help activate our immune system and to help attack the viruses. So we have this relatively small group of symptoms that can go with a lot of different illnesses. The common cold is common. It's centered in the nose. They're called rhinoviruses, nose viruses. And the three most frequent symptoms are nasal stuffiness, sneezing, and runny nose. You might get some throat irritation, but it's usually not red. You might have a mild fever. Especially babies will often have a fever with a cold, but it's primarily in the nose. You might get a headache. You might get a cough. You might get some postnasal drip, but it's mostly there. And within 1 to 3 days, the nasal secretions start to get thick and maybe yellow or green. With flu, though, from the get-go, you're sick all over. Classically, it starts suddenly. You get a fever, significant fever over 102. You often have a flushed face. You have body aches. Your energy level goes dropping down. You might have dizziness or vomiting. And usually you have whole body symptoms for the first maybe 2, 3, 4 days of it. And then you might have a lot of the symptoms of a cold, the sneezing or coughing or sore throat or other things that are going on. But the flu can be a really serious illness. It's a whole body illness. That's a pretty big deal.
You've been listening to Dr. Alan Green. He's founder of drgreen.com and the author of Feeding Baby Green and Raising Baby Green. And if you do have the flu, you should be in touch with your physician.
And your pediatrician, absolutely. And there are some antiviral medications. People, even now, don't seem to realize that, yes, there are drugs that can help get you over the flu faster. They're not miracle pills, but they do help. Well, we welcome your calls, especially if you have a home remedy to share. Let's see who's next. Terry?
Barbara in Independence, Virginia. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. Did you have a home remedy to share?
I certainly did, and I'm delighted that I learned it from you all. Some time ago, you had talked about black pepper to stop bleeding, and I'd made a little note and put it inside my medicine cabinet. At Thanksgiving time, my son-in-law was being a wonderful young man and was sharpening some of my knives when he slipped and cut his thumb and pointer finger. The thumb could have used sutures. And I was out on the deck by the bonfire, and they hollered, and I came into the house and said, "Oh, I think I know what to do." And I ran to check my medicine cabinet, and I came back, and I said, "Let's put pepper on it." Well, my son-in-law looked at me like, "Oh, this woman has really lost it now." And I said, no. So he went to his little, whatever you call those gizmos, they research things on 21st century mechanism, and came back to me and said, "Yeah, turmeric or black pepper it says here." And I said, "See, I am not really crazy." Well, I didn't have any fine pepper, so we just grated ground pepper, black pepper, and I put on it, and I promise you, it stopped bleeding. We did apply pressure, especially on the bad cut, for a while longer. And the forefinger cut by the next day was almost like healed. The other one, the thumb that was so bad, I put a waterproof bandage over it that night, thinking if he turned in his sleep or something, because it was a kind of cut that, can easily pop open. And I said, let's do this just in case. No problems at all. And so the next day, we gently took that bandage off, and he gently let some water run over it, and it healed fine.
I
have passed it on at water aerobics and at quilt guild, and I actually purchased a fairly large can of black pepper, and I put it in my emergency box in my automobile too.
So the next time somebody gets cut, you won't have to stand there and grind up the pepper.
No, I won't.
So as far as you're concerned, black pepper works for cuts?
It certainly does.
And let's go back to the phones. Blacksburg, Virginia. Kay, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's your story, please?
Hi, this is a story about my aunt. This is more than 20 years ago. She had, I don't even remember the cancer anymore, except it was in the pelvic area. And they overtreated her with radiation to the extent that she had these horrible radiation ulcers, and they couldn't do anything about them to cure them.
Kay, can I ask you, if you're on a speakerphone, could you just pick up the phone, please?
Yes, can you hear me now?
That's a little better. Thank you.
Okay, and they could not cure these radiation ulcers, and finally, apparently, the doctor had heard of the sugar cure, and he packed her wounds with sugar, and she recovered beautifully, and that was always a story that she told the rest of her life. She was always so excited about that.
Well, and we can thank Dr. Richard Knudsen, because he's the first one to bring that to medical colleagues' attention. When was that article published, Terry?
1981, November of 1981.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And, I love these stories because doctors like to say randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, and I like randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials myself. That's the only way that we can really, in a sense, rule out chance, bias, or susceptibility. But, when a cut stops bleeding almost instantly, do you need a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial? Either it's bleeding or it's not bleeding.
Maybe you do, but I think for most home remedies, we don't get that. We get to try it out. We get to see if it works for us, and we make a judgment based on what we think the possible hazards are and the benefits. As for sugar, we got an interesting email from a retired veterinarian who says she used to care for monkeys and apes who lived not always peaceably in social groups. So she treated hundreds of contaminated wounds with a thick slurry of table sugar dissolved in sterile saline or freshly drawn tap water. She began using it after reading an article in The Lancet that reported the successful treatment of a case series of patients with non-healing deep cavity wounds following chest surgery, and that one was published in 1985. The sugar kills the bacteria through osmotic action. It attracts the body's cleanup crew of macrophages, and that's how it promotes rapid cleansing and healing of the wound. And this vet says don't use betadine.
Well, that has actually been quite controversial over the years. We've heard from a lot of nurses who say betadine impedes healing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons why Dr. Knudsen has moved to cooking oil.
And it may have been the ointment was as important as the iodine in the original betadine ointment. The vet goes on to say that even if the animals lick it off, the sugar solution seems to work quickly, but she does give a couple cautions. Like Dr. Knudsen, she says don't put it on fresh wounds that are bleeding. And she also says if the wound covers a huge amount of body surface compared to the size of the animal, it could be absorbed into the blood and cause damage to the kidneys.
Okay, good cautions. Let's go to Windsor. Jay, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's up?
Hi, Joe and Terry. How are you today?
We're doing well. We hope you are. Do you have a story?
Yes, sir. During my youth, I had frequent ingrown toenails and I would agree with Dr. Knudsen. My grandmother told me to put some soap and sugar on those wounds and wrap them with wax paper, and that cured them every time.
Jay, that's great to hear. Thank you. How do you wrap a toenail with wax paper? Do you use a rubber band on it?
I actually used to use tape, and I would do it at night, and then by the morning they would be healed. This is 40 years ago, so it seems like this is something that we've probably been using for years.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
Lindsay in Somerville, South Carolina. You're on the People's Pharmacy. What's your story?
Yes, sir. I was listening. I came in at the tail end of the doctor talking about the sugar, and then I heard the vet talking about the sugar. And I'm a part of the clustering community, and we regularly use sugar paired with iodine or oil or anything else for scrubbing wounds, for packing hooves, for just about anything. It's one of our cure-alls.
Well, that's great to hear. And I suspect that horses sometimes do get into scrapes now and again.
They do. They're really accident-prone creatures. But, it's worked great for them. And, they're not in the most sanitary environments. And they regularly reopen wounds and everything. And also, as a side note, my family uses regular table sugar and olive oil for kind of poulticing feet and keeping skin nice.
Okay.
Well, that's good to hear.
Thank you, Lindsay. We appreciate your calling in today. Bye-bye. 888-472-3366. If you have a home remedy to share, what are you doing this holiday season when it comes to leg cramps or restless legs, or perhaps you've got a little indigestion? Have you been going to too many holiday parties, overeating, over-drinking? Has the heartburn been, kicking up in the middle of the night? Well, we'd like to hear how you're dealing with those symptoms at 888-472-3366. You can email us, Joe or Terry at peoplespharmacy.com.
Let's go to Harrisonburg, Virginia, and talk to Joe about hiccups. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Joe.
Thank you, Joe and Terry. Hello, how are you?
We're doing well, Joe. What's on your mind?
I have two remedies, one for hiccups and one for preventing, I think it's just preventing the symptoms of common cold, although it might be preventing the common cold itself. For the hiccup, you take a deep breath, as deep as you can, and then hold it as long as you can. And then we can't hold it any longer, you let it out, and then you do it again. You take a breath as deep as you can and hold it as long as you can. And then your hiccups, I guarantee, will be gone. And I suspect it works for two reasons. Number one, it interrupts the hiccup reflex. And number two, it boosts the carbon dioxide in your blood. But it doesn't require any other
you don't need any props for this.
You don't need any props. And then for the common cold, what I do is at each meal I eat half a teacup of raw sauerkraut, and then I also eat no sweets at all. And this works this well. Very recently, when I was at the dentist, one of the ladies working on my teeth had a messy cold, and a couple evenings later I had a stuffy right nostril, and then I used this method, and it went away. And I strongly suspect, like I said, it's just hitting the symptoms. One other thing which might be making a difference is there are times when I intentionally let myself have the full cold symptoms run their course, because I think that we are symbiotic with colds. So that might also be part of it, that I am letting my colds come sometimes. But it's when there's a certain time when it's inconvenient, I can't have a cold now, I do this, and it works to prevent the cold.
Joe, I think you're a masochist. I mean, why would anybody want a cold to run the course if you had a treatment that worked? Now, I have to say, I've never heard the sauerkraut for colds.
No, but we do know that sauerkraut, which is a fermented food, has all kinds of interesting properties, and we have used it. We have heard about it used against canker sores.
Right. Well, more the sauerkraut juice. You're supposed to slosh the sauerkraut juice around in your mouth and then swallow about a tablespoonful, and do that twice a day for canker sores. And some people say it really does work. Let's go to Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, where I used to live for a very short period of time. Michael, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. How's Susquehanna these days?
Hello, Susquehanna is doing quite well. We're enjoying a mild winter up here.
You had a bad flood not too long ago, is that right?
Yes, we did. We had a combination of a flood and Hurricane Katrina. We got hit from both ways, and we're still recovering up here. Most of the low-lying valleys are still under infrastructure construction.
Now, we only have a minute before our break, so tell us about your crazy glue.
Okay, well, really fast. Back in the Vietnam War, the lacerations and deep wounds that could not be cut or closed by suturing, they would use a solution that's now known as crazy glue. And the medics would, drip the solution out onto the wound. It would close and harden up, and they would get the medevac out into the hospitals. Now today, if you're at home, whether you're, like before carving turkeys or whatever, and you're slicing your finger or another part of your body, you can use household crazy glue to close the wound if you needed to go to the hospital and get stitches, or you could leave it on there if it's not that bad.
Well, Michael, I hope no one will be slicing their fingers when it comes to carving the turkey, but just
that's why we have forks.
That's why we have forks and knives. That's right. And but thank you for the tip, Terry. You were just about to say.
I was going to say that they do use something very similar to crazy glue in surgical wounds in the hospital, but there is also a product called liquid bandage. Now, it is more expensive than the household instant glue, but it is specifically designed for use on skin.
And people tell us it works great. That is to say, crazy glue or instant glue, if you have those little cracks on the tips of your fingers that happen when your fingers are dry.
Very common this time of year.
Yes. Well, we're taking a break. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk about the power of yoga to change a life. We'll also take more of your calls about home remedies at 888-472-3366. Don't forget you can email us, Joe or Terry, Terry, at peoplespharmacy.com, or via Twitter at People's Pharmacy.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Car Drug, North Carolina-based and nationally recognized for rethinking the role of community pharmacy through its community healthcare centers, offering immunizations, screenings, and medication counseling online at kerrdrug.com.
And by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website, uttercream.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're thinking about home remedies for the holidays. We welcome your calls and your questions. You can share your favorite home remedies, your favorite stories. 888-472-3366 is the number to call. If you can't get through because our lines are busy, you can reach us by email, Joe at peoplespharmacy.com, Terry, Terry, at peoplespharmacy.com, or via Twitter.
A few weeks ago, we talked with physiatrist Dr. Lauren Fishman about how he has incorporated yoga into his practice of physical medicine. He told us this story about one patient he'd seen.
We had a man who came in. It's hard to believe, the 21st century. He crawled in. He had taken a plane from California. I don't know how he got from the airport to my place, but he did. He crawled into my office.
Are you talking on hands and knees?
Hands and knees, that's what I'm talking. No gloves, he just was ready to do it. He'd been doing it for a couple of months. Asian man, had seen all the neurosurgeons you could shake a stick at in Los Angeles, and he had come out to see me. He had read some article or something that I'd written, and he just about cried. He didn't cry. His lips were quivering. He was in a heck of a lot of pain, probably more because of the red eye he took to get to New York. I don't know how he tolerated that, but he did. And there was a therapist there, a woman named Tova Ovadia. And the two of us talked about him, and we figured out a very simple arching the back type exercise, which he was, terribly afraid to do. But with the encouragement and with the type of body language that came from the two of us, he got enough confidence to be able to do it. At first, very little, then I'd say moderately, and finally he really went whole hog. I think he felt encouraged by some relief that he felt with the earlier phases. But then he went really into the pose. He walked out.
Oh, that is a wonderful story. And was he able to continue to improve?
Well, I sent him it was a couple of years ago, but I sent him an email later that day and said, "Are you still okay? And, come back if you need to. You're a long way from us." And he wrote me back and said, "I'm happy as a clam." Those were his words.
That was Dr. Lauren Fishman, author of Yoga for Osteoporosis, Yoga for Arthritis, and Cure Back Pain with Yoga from a radio show we did a couple of weeks ago.
And not long after that show, Dr. Fishman got an email from a listener in Lynchburg, Virginia. He said, "Today, while listening to your interview on the People's Pharmacy, I was surprised you mentioned a man from California practically crawling on his hands and knees. I do believe you were referring to me, for your description fit my condition at the time of my visit to your office."
And he goes on to say, "It was sometime in 1998 when, in desperation, I went to your office looking for relief. You diagnosed my condition as piriformis syndrome and a sacroiliac derangement. As you stated in the interview, I walked out of your office on the first visit.
On the second day, I walked from Washington Square to downtown and across the Brooklyn Bridge. Upon reporting my improvement, you and Tova told me to take it easy, but I was just so happy to be pain-free after so much aggravation.
After my return to Los Angeles, I started practicing yoga at the BKS Iyengar Institute of Los Angeles, and under the care of some wonderful teachers, I gained some flexibility, strength, and the ability to meditate.
Gradually, I resumed bicycle riding and swimming daily and changed my lifestyle. I'm vegetarian, eat no processed foods or sugars, and adjusted my activities so as not to aggravate the permanent structural damage.
My injury happened 14 years ago. I'm now 63 years old and in very good health. The lower back is no longer an issue worth dwelling on. I am so grateful to you and to Tova." And we got that email message thanks to Dr. Fishman, and it's so nice when people can kind of reconnect, in this case after 14 years, and, when people change their lives for the better and hear about something of this nature, it might inspire them to make change too.
Absolutely. And we welcome your calls today. The number is 888-472-3366. Caroline in Roanoke, Virginia, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What is your remedy?
Hello. Well, I tried your soap story in the bed for restless leg syndrome, and after 20 years, I'm here to tell you it works.
Well, there are a lot of listeners who are going, "What's Caroline talking about? A soap story?" Well,
what's a restless leg?
And what soap story are you talking about? So fill them in. What is RLS, restless leg syndrome, and how bad was it, and how well did the soap work, and where did you put it?
Okay. I heard on your radio about this guy. He called in and he said that I guess he heard it on your show about putting soap in his bed, just a cake of soap. And I thought, well, it couldn't hurt. So I went down and got a cake of soap, and I brought it, and I put it in my bed. And I thought, now I'm just not going to think about it. And every night when I go to bed, my foot would just like have a constant jiggle to it. And it was like it was just part of my life every night. And so I slept through the whole night, and I thought, well, I didn't have any cramps, and I didn't have any urge to kick my foot like I normally do. It's like an electricity that goes through your body, and you just have to kick to make it stop. And I've had this soap in my bed now for 2 months, and I tell you what, it's just like for 20 years I haven't had any physician to tell me what to do for it. they would check my magnesium level and all this stuff, and everything would be fine, potassium. But this little cake of soap, I make sure it doesn't fall off. In fact, I put another cake in here just for extra measure.
You're surrounded by soap.
Yeah, it kind of moves to the foot of the bed, but if I hear it in the middle of the night hit the floor, I get up and find it.
I have been known to kick the soap down to the bottom as well, and sometimes have to go scurrying around looking for it in the middle of the night. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for sharing your story. You can actually see a picture of where to put the soap if you go to the peoplespharmacy.com website and search for soap.
Search for soap.
There'll be pictures, and you'll get an idea. What are they talking about? Well, it's pretty straightforward.
Joe, we got an email from Karen in Indian Land, South Carolina. She says there is an Ayurvedic remedy for digestive upset, whether it's related to a virus going around or to eating the wrong stuff, maybe overindulging a bit. And here she puts it together. It's called a lassi. It's a 1/3 cup of full-fat yogurt, preferably organic, 2/3 of a cup of water, and honey, ground ginger, cinnamon, and ground cardamom to taste. She churns it all together with a blender or mixer, and it just makes it wonderful and takes care of that digestive difficulty.
Excellent. Let's go to Plano, Texas. Kathy, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. You have something about leg cramps?
I certainly do. Thank you. Good morning, or hello. I have it's called just a teaspoon of mustard. You get up, if your leg hurts, you get up, go get a teaspoon of prepared mustard and put it in your mouth and eat it, and its pains goes away.
Well, this is the time of year when a lot of folks are going to be standing around in the kitchen cooking or at the mall walking and shopping, and so leg cramps are likely to be a problem. And this is not the first time we've heard about mustard, especially if it's the cheap yellow mustard like French's. Yellow
mustard seems to be the preferred remedy for a leg cramp or a muscle cramp. And I think there might be two explanations. One is it's got vinegar in it. And another remedy is pickle juice or vinegar. People tell us that can be very helpful. And the other is that that yellow mustard has turmeric in it.
Now, Kathy, when you do the yellow mustard leg cramp remedy, how long does it take for it to kick in?
Probably about 30 seconds to a minute.
Well, that's been our experience as well. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. Oh, we love that yellow mustard remedy. Let's go to Coburn, Virginia.
No, we went to Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Oh, going to Fayetteville first.
Yes, and we're talking to Gayla. Gayla, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What is your remedy?
Well, I want to say hello and thank you for listening to me. My grandmother grew up on a sharecropper's farm in the early 1900s in Denton County, Texas. And horehound grew everywhere. She said it was just everywhere. They couldn't get rid of it. And when she was real little, anytime someone had the sniffles, her mother would go outside and just grab a handful of leaves of the horehound, and she would boil it like a tea and steep it and make them drink it as hot as they could stand the water. And she said they got well almost instantly. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, like I've ever heard of this. And so she said, oh, no, it works. And so she found some leaves for me, and she said my dog was sick. We had a black Labrador. And she said, I'm going to make him some horehound tea. And I said, I thought you said he had to drink that very hot. She said, well, yes, he does. I said, he's not going to touch it. She said, you wait and see. She made him horehound tea, filled his water bowl with water very, very hot. And she dripped just a little bit of lemon juice in it for flavor, she said. But he drank the whole thing. And by that afternoon, this was an early morning, and by afternoon, he had no shivers. What I thought was fever was gone, and no sore throat. She told me he had a sore throat. He was well. And so after that, I found from Shumway Seed Company where I could buy seeds to grow my own horehound. And so we started out growing it in pots and then ended up out in the yard. And she was right. It spreads. But I started drying the leaves and kept them in the freezer. And every time we had the sniffles or the dog was sick, we would have hot tea.
Well, Gayla, thank you so much for sharing that. And, of course, horehound candies have been used for
exactly right.
decades.
For as a cough remedy, an old-fashioned cough remedy, or for a sore throat. But I had no idea that you could actually grow horehound, and that, like mint, it is so invasive.
I've got an email from AJ in Houston. AJ says, I heard about taking 1 tablespoon of blackstrap unsulfured molasses for hemorrhoids about a month ago. I was seeing a doctor, was using Preparation H wipes, suppositories, maximum strength creams just to get by. So I figured, what the heck? I went to the Whole Foods store, bought a bottle. In less than 30 days, wow, hallelujah. All evidence of hemorrhoids, pain, discomfort, bleeding, itching have gone. Now, I'm not saying this will work for everyone, but it sure as heck worked for me. I'm scheduled for a proctosigmoidoscopy. Oh, boy, yum. Within 2 weeks to check, and I will try and get back here to let everyone know the results. If you'd like to know more about blackstrap molasses and hemorrhoids, just go to our website and search for blackstrap molasses or hemorrhoids, and you'll see a lot of stories.
Now, what we understand from people is not that they're applying it topically, which would be extremely messy, but that they are taking a tablespoon a day.
Yeah, this is not a topical application.
No.
No, I don't even want to think about that. But oral,
right.
and I can't explain this. I mean, pharmacologically, it makes, would you say 0 sense that a tablespoon of blackstrap molasses?
Well, what I would say is I don't understand it. I'm not a pharmacologist, though. I'll let you do the pharmacology part.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me, I can assure you. Here's another email. This one came from Kim. Kim says, okay, I'm all for natural remedies, and I've read a lot of testimonials in my day, but this is outrageous, so I thought I'd try it. I grabbed the only bar of soap I could find, Burt's Bees shampoo bar, and within 3 minutes, my back pain was pain-free. I put it in an old knee-high stocking, placed it over my L4, L5, and voila. Miracle, I tell you. I have had 2 old fractures and 2 ruptured discs. So my hubby, he was laughing at me and decided to try it. He has scoliosis. His exact words, well, I've always known you are a witch doctor. I swear, I think it's grounding some sort of electromagnetic energy from the nervous system, but what the heck, I'm amazed. If this thing continues to work, I'll keep using it.
Well, we have no idea why soap would work against leg cramps or restless legs or against aches and pains like sort of arthritis type, but we have heard from quite a few people that it can.
We have. And do we have time to just go very quickly to Ray in Martinsville, Virginia? Ray, you've got about 30 seconds to share your story about soy sauce.
It works great for burns, deep burns. It makes the pain goes away almost immediately, and heals. There's no pain afterward. Heals without scarring, without blistering. And I got this from someone who called a couple of years ago on your show, and you said you weren't aware of it either. But he said during the Korean War they used it. They used it on people with bad burn victims, the Koreans, and it works incredibly well.
And we have since tried it and found that it is very helpful against those kitchen burns. So try not to burn yourself this holiday, but if you do, pour a little soy sauce on it after the cold water.
Ray, thank you so much for sharing your story. Yes, first, always get a minor household burn under cold water immediately, and then you can try the soy sauce or even cold yellow mustard afterwards. And, of course, we want to caution, we've been having fun talking about home remedies today, but anything that's serious, whether it's a really bad burn or a bad cut, needs to be taken to the emergency department immediately.
And I'm sorry we didn't have time for George in Coburn, Virginia, to tell us about his arthritis remedy. Maybe next time.
Well, maybe George will put it on our website and everybody else can find out about Buckeye for arthritis. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for listening to The People's Pharmacy. If you didn't get your question answered, or you couldn't get through to share your story, you can post a comment at peoplespharmacy.com, or you can call 888-472-3366. Leave a message.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show and provided technical assistance. Peter Bombar and Al Wadarsky are our engineers. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
Next week on The People's Pharmacy, we talk with a famed neurosurgeon about how his experience as a patient changed his practice of medicine.
If you'd like to order a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. It's show number 839. That number again, 800-732-2334. You can also place the order on our website. It's peoplespharmacy.com. And when you're there at the website, you can post a comment or vote on today's show, share your own story. We'd surely love to hear from you.
You can also watch our videos. We have a brand new video up on our website. You can look up past radio shows, and you can find out more about home remedies, especially those in our new National Geographic book, People's Pharmacy Quick and Handy Home Remedies. You can find out about indigestion remedies, nausea remedies, diarrhea remedies, constipation remedies. You know, if you're visiting relatives, you're going to want to take along some sugarless gum and maybe a little power pudding. It's all there at People's Pharmacy. You can also sign up for our free weekly email newsletter or subscribe to the free podcast of our show. It will be delivered straight to your computer, and you'll never miss another People's Pharmacy program again. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thanks very much for listening, and please join us again next week.
Life can be chaotic. If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment add to the chaos. Use ShipStation instead. With ShipStation, you never have to worry about shipping and fulfillment again. Whether you're running a business out of your garage or you have multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your business's growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating repetitive tasks. Plus, you'll save money with the best shipping rates from global carriers. ShipStation's industry-leading features help you deliver a better customer experience. They'll get accurate and faster shipments along with automated tracking updates with your branding. And with up to 88% off UPS and USPS rates and up to 90% off FedEx rates, ShipStation is the fastest and most affordable way to ship. Calm the chaos. Switch to ShipStation today. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.